Good evening. I'm here tonight to speak to you about the total disappearance of an ancient village, as one might speak about the disappearance of a relative or of a close friend. I have spent the last quarter century struggling to save this village, in the midst of complete indifference, not least of which that of the Algerian government. It is this indifference that hurts the most. This anonymous village, too insignificant to even figure on a map, tonight is the subject of presentation in the highest academic reaches of the planet. It is, for me, quite an emotional moment, as you can imagine. It took the demise of my village for it to become famous and recognized. That is how it goes sometimes for both places and man. I wouldn't have experienced this emotion had it not been for my old friend Khalil Bendib, whom I had briefly met in Algiers 40 years ago. He spoke of this to Emily Gautrich, who had the great heart and generosity to welcome this presentation. I thank both of them from the bottom of my heart. I was born in a small village of Little Kabylia in 1953, just before the start of the Algerian War of Independence of November 54. In order to cut off independence fighters from the Algerian population, the French army displaced 2.5 million peasants from 16,000 villages to concentrate them in 1,000 so-called regroupment camps. I was in one of those, and thus I spent all my childhood in the camp of Eragen, in the midst of 6,500 peasants, a camp that was surrounded by barbed wire and subjected to a daily curfew and numerous raids, but which had a school and was regularly visited by medical doctors. It is thanks to this internal exile that I was able to go to school and that I am here with you tonight. As I was growing up, the French state was building a dam downhill from our camp. I saw the construction of that huge site. I saw being filled with water and coming ever closer to our houses. In 1962, with independence, I went home to my native village. During that time, the dam had completely submerged the camp, the theater of my childhood. This was my Atlantis fallen to the sea. In the old village, life had become impossible. There were no sources of water left. Wild brush had invaded our fields, and our houses were half destroyed. We had then taken the bundles of our major possessions and immigrated to Algiers. This trip from my village to Algiers in 1962 was the biggest shock of my entire life. There I saw the sea for the first time. Electricity, radio, a modern building. And most of all, I discovered and suffered so much from the ostracism of big city people against us, humble peasants. It was such a feeling of exile that never again would I ever feel a stranger in any other countries, from Chile to Uzbekistan, Sudan, Israel, and Russia. After 12 years in exile in Algiers, I took my suitcase again and went to France at age 20. There, I learned my job as a reporter and was able to cover other conflicts, from Latin America to Central Asia and the Middle East. But I had never forgotten my village. I never stopped sending money there to open a new road, dig for new wells, bring electricity from the Oregon Dam, which was located only 4 miles from my village. Until 19, when it finally dawned on me that my village would be left to die. I had brought with me a great photographer, Philippe Lafont, and headed for my place of birth to do a story on the village. My old uncles, my girl cousins. This was my way of salvaging images before the shipwreck. Published in February 91, the report struck a nerve. I had slipped in it a call for retired French soldiers to send me photo of the village and of the submerged camp. Indeed, after the camp itself, my village would be next on the shopping block. Fortunately, retired officers immediately started sending me color photos of the camps. A miracle. I would see again the camp, the houses, our barrack, my cousins, my father's truck, and myself at age 6 at school, the oldest photo of me that I ever had. You can imagine the emotion and all the past that resurfaced with those images. Ever since, I have pursued my quest to retrieve ever more documents, photo, drawings, and even news footage. Fate had given its verdict. Had given its verdict. I had to lose the landscapes of my childhood before I could retrieve the images. Both of them had disappeared to achieve celebrity and even visibility. I have assembled here for you, and for the first time in public, a collection of images which will summarize for you a story at once intimate and collective. So this is the image today. The mountains are the mountains called Babors, because in Kabylia you have two Kabylia, the great Kabylia with the mountains Gergera and the little Kabylia with mountains of Babors. This is the lake. The camp where I grew is under the water. This is in 19 when I in the village with my great father. He's still in the village because the administration promised for them to give them electricity. They are my uncles. Because the administration gave them the promise to give them electricity, they buy it. They bought television and, comment on dit frigidaire? Refrigerators, you see? But they never saw the electricity. They are died, the two are died. Only in the middle, my uncle Ashur is alive. They died, the village is empty today, and they never saw the electricity. This is the camion, comment on dit camion? The truck of my father, because he was in the battle between Algerian fighters and the French army. He was in the middle of the field of the suddenly fighting, and the camion was burned. This is my school. You know, the army, because in our villages in the camp, no school, but the army gave us une tente, comment on dit une tente? A tent, and I am here. This is Madame Cabanal, our teachers. She comes from France. She was a wonderful person. Malgré la guerre, comment on dit malgré? In spite of the war. in spite of the war, some soldiers, they was our teachers, and her, they was perfectly correct, very human, and I have immense gratitude for them. One of my cousins in the school, the camp under the lake. This is the camp. This is another view of the camp. This is the lake. This is the first machine, modern machine I saw in my life. It is a helicopter, American helicopter, Sikorsky. After many years after j'ai su le nom, the name, Sikorsky. But we called it banana, because like banana, no. This is the camp, inside the camp. The huge of the lake.
This is the dam being built.
Yes.
Different stages. Starting to fill the camp with water.
This is the village of the technicians, the French.
The French technicians who were
French technicians. Yes. The school of the French technicians.
They have their own separate school, obviously.
Yes. La piscine.
This is the swimming pool for the French people.
This is the camp for technicians.
Yeah.
And my village is here behind the Lost Mountain.
Behind the Lost Mountain.
Yes. This is today in the summer because the water
Subsides.
This is the village for the French technicians. The lake. Soldiers. Some village peasants. The original village. This is after independence. You see many children, they don't have shoes. This is the camion of my father. The day of the attack, you can see the name Zeghidour on the door of the camion.
What was your father doing? What kind of work was he doing with this?
Before the camp, he was agriculture. In the camp, he buy this truck, and he opened, and he was un commerçant itinérant. This is the truck of my father. They are my cousins. This how is our barrack. This one. This is the last year where I saw the snow in my village in the camp.
What year was that?
62.
62.
Yes. And this year, in the 2 last March, I returned for the first time to see the snow for the first time since 50 years.
It was an exceptional year.
Good question. Here, the story is my subjective and individual story in the camp. But sure, the story, the war was horrible. When I went, boy, this helicopter, Sikorsky, one in the dawn, 5 hours in the morning, when we hear the when we was terrified. Many times I remember in my father, my mother, all people is terrified by this situation. This is the problem with the violence was terrible, as you know. Second problem, the problem of in the camp, no hygiene, no enough water. 10% of the child died. For example, I have two brothers and one sister. They has tuberculosis and died in the camp. Me, I has, comment on dit, primo infection. Yes, and the war, the tragedy of Algeria is not only the war, you know. After the war, the tragedy of the war continue after. Why? When the war finished, the 2.5 million peasants was displaced from 16,000 villages. The middle of the rural population of Algeria was displaced.
Half of the rural population of
Was displaced. It's terrible, anthropologically, humanly terrible. When the independence came, the new state make nothing for help people come back to the villages. You know, so the majority of the population immigrate to the cities because the cities become empty. The French people leave their apartment, their villa, their houses, and the many persons from a rural population enter to Algiers and get apartments, houses. Not us. We arrive too late and we have another barrack. The 16,000 villages died. If you travel today in Algeria, you can see many villages completely empty. And you have the cities, around the cities you have suburb, very problematic suburb. And I have a friend, he is a sociologist. He studied the violence in the Second War, the civil war in Algeria. He make a topography of the violence. After 90s, the violence was worst in the suburb where these people was refugee for the second time. In the big cities. So the consequences in Algeria, we don't have paysannerie. Algeria import 18% of his food. 80%. Algeria has only 36 million inhabitants, but it is the first importer of the milk, lait en poudre. Powder, because no farm, nothing, significatively nothing. So the war displaced us in the country. The independence a parachevé, a consacré ce déracinement.
The independence completed this uprooting.
Yes, we win our independence, but we lost our land. It's terrible paradox. We win the independence, but we leave our country. Culturally, emotionally, we leave the country. For example, I have 60. Next year, I will be 60. Will be 60. I saw 2 wars in my country. And when I went the 2 last March, you know, it was something very strange. The oldest military construction of the French army in the mountains to control the city, they was destroyed after the independence. But right now the Algerian army rebuild the same fortification, the same post of observation, and they crossed seven checkpoints of Algerian army. So when I was in my childhood, in the same places I crossed checkpoints, military checkpoints. 50 years after, in the same places, I crossed same checkpoints. Terrible. Worst of these, my original village. The last time I went in the village in 93. When I arrived in the village, the war, the civilian war, was started since 1 year. The situation was very, very stressed. I was afraid, really afraid to be killed, because no state. The state, after the civilian war, the policy, general policy of the doctrine of the state is to concentrate all the forces for protect only le pays utile.
The useful country.
The useful country. Big cities, manufactories, ports, airports, embassies, and let the villages. So my uncles, my cousins live for the second times, left for the second times the village, and they go not for the camps but in the cities, in Algiers, Paris, Canada. And you know, you can't believe me, since 93 I cannot come back in my village, in the house where I was born. 20 years, the third of my life, I can't see because it's like in the first war, it is the area is zone interdite.
Forbidden zone.
Yes, forbidden zone. And I don't know when I can to see these my village. So I told something about 2 or 3 teachers, soldiers. Madame Cabanal, my teacher, they was wonderful people, and in all wars I saw after that this situation in other countries, there is always good people, but and I had a chance to meet these people. We had the chance to meet these teachers as a child, yes.
To meet them, to know them.
Yes, and because there was people like them, the Algerian people and the French people, they has today the more more dense relation between them. For example, there is more Algerians married with French than Algerian married with his citizens for all Arab countries. There is more Algerians only in Marseille, in city of Marseille, than Algerians, the numbers of Algerians in all the Arabs' capitals. In the colonial period, it was 500,000 Algerians in France. Today, we have 10 more.
10 times more.
10 times more Algerian in France. In 62, it was in Algiers only 3 newspapers in French language. Today you have 27 newspapers in French language in Algiers. So the independence not cut the relation between the two people. They increase the relations between the two people. This is the Algerian paradox. Because you have topography of the war. Colonial Algeria was like an hemiplegic country. You have from Algiers to west The majority of French people, they was of the west of the country, from Algiers to Morocco. And you have only small minority in the east. The majority of the Algerian population was of the east, and my region is comment dit pluviométrie? The rainfall, the more important place, rainfall in Mediterranean, 160 1600 millimeters of rain each year.
1600
millimeters. 3 fois plus qu'à Paris, 3 more than in Paris. So you have many vegetation.
A lot of vegetation and mountains.
Mountains, villages, water. It was the ideal topography of the guerrilla and of the war. For that, the Algerian war was between the east of Algiers until the Tunisia border. So 350 kilometers east-west, and maybe 100 kilometers only. It's small. For that, the war was terrible. In the camp, no, because the camp was, in the war, insurrectional war, like the war of Algeria, it was the school of the doctrine of the war. The goal of the two protagonists is the population, the civilian population. And we have a life, schizophrenic life. In the day, we have the French army. So each one tried to give a good image to the French soldiers. We are good citizens, we are peaceful citizens. At night, the FLN, the nationalist fighters, coming. And you have a climate of suspicions. Terrible. So, because the camp was surrounded by barbelés, it was the majority of the men was in the mountain in the war, or in prison, in jail. The majority of the population of the camp was women, old people, and children. So it was very difficult, the resistance in the camp. But I remember, for example, some nights when the fighters tried to enter in the camp to cut the barbelés, to cut and enter, the French army attacked, and I remember in the darkness, the line of the fire. We remember these images. Or the more hard in my souvenir, the more emotional is when the helicopter Banana come, and you have the soldiers. One other thing very interesting: the soldiers, it was French soldiers, Algerian militias, German from Légion étrangère, foreign legion, German, and soldiers from Africa, tirailleurs sénégalais. It was a multinational, multi-ethnic army. And I remember when the helicopter come, and the soldiers, jump, and to tell this house, take people in the helicopter, and there you go. .5 million soldiers for 9 million Algerians. 1.5 million. The majority of the soldiers was from the called metropole, from France, not from Algeria. And for us it was, for our fathers, our family, it was very great surprise. Why? Till the war, the only French people our fathers saw, there was the colonial people. Colonial people, the majority, they was from Italy, Sicilia, from Andalusia, from Malta, some few people from Croatia and from Switzerland. They was called Petit Blanc. The Petit Blanc, they have special psychological profile because they was not French originally, first of all. Second, they has a face, Arabic face, because like Sicilian, Maltese and Andalusian, they has Arabic face. And for that, they was more hostile, more aggressive against the Algerian people because they was similar. And this population has a conflict, daily conflict with the Algerian neighbor. This relation was aggressive. But the soldiers from France, they knows Algeria only by the book of the school. In the book of the school, there has a metaphor told the Mediterranean cross France like the Seine River cross Paris. The same country in the south Mediterranean, the north. These soldiers, they thinking they have to fight to keep the republic, a people, a country, and when they arrive in Kabylia, they discover another planet. No school, no doctors, no road asphalts, nothing. Majority of them, they was traumatized by their discovery. And there is today a literature, historical literature, historiographical literature about some of these soldiers. They left the French army to go with the Algerians fighters.
They defected. They were so shocked by what they found.
And I think the war was the first real meeting between the deep France and the deep Algeria, for the first time. For example, we have an expression in our villages when people want to talk about a good French people, they told it's true French. C'est un vrai Français. A true French is equivalent of good man.
Positive.
A positive. You have something similar and something different. The difference is that in Algeria, the Algerian was a majority in their country. In Israel-Palestine, I think in Israel is the only case where the population, the colonial population, is more important than the dominated population. Is a big difference. One, for example, the French, other difference, the French doctrine of the colonization never told for the Algerian, you are not here in your country. But the French doctrine of the colonization has told we are not invaders. We was here in the empire, the Roman Empire, We was here. Our ancestors was in Algeria after the Arabs was the colonizers.
So the Arabs were the true invaders, not the French.
Yes. And we are coming,
Back.
we come back in our countries. But, malgré cela, never they told the Algerians they are not in their country. In the Israel-Palestine, the situation is the two people, they have exclusive methodologies for the same country. For example, the doctrine, the colonial doctrine, French colonial doctrine, has a goal to integrate the Algerian, a goal, theoretical goal to integrate all the Algerians in the French nationality. And the nationalistic discourse, Algerian discourse, theoretically accept that the French people still in Algeria after the independence. But in the case of Palestine and Israel, each one dreamed to live alone without there is like a phantasm of purity. This is a difference. And the other difference is the question of the land. In Israel, the question of the land in the two people has something metaphysic or too much ideologized. For example, you know, in Israel, the land, a citizen Israeli, Jewish citizen Israeli, he can't buy a land for him personally. The land is not for state, is for Jewish people in the world, like an entity for Jewish people. And they don't have right to send this land for no Jewish people. So you have a sanctification of the land. In the Palestinian side, originally they don't have sanctification of the land. But right now, yes. For example, you have a law in the Palestinian Authority, if a Palestinian sends his land for an Israeli, he has the deed pen capital. Capital sanction. So the question of the land is very, very hard in the Palestine. The last, maybe the difference is in Israel and the Palestine. You have in the Palestine you don't have all the Jewish people and you don't have all the Palestinian people. You have 5 million Jewish between 15 million. Yes, we have the third of the Jewish only in the Palestine. And you have only the middle of the Palestinian, the half of Palestinian in the Palestine. This is, in Algeria, all the people was inside Algeria. But not all the French people was inside Algeria. This is also a difference. This question of the contrition of apologies of France, it's not a popular question in Algeria because it's an ideological question in Algeria. Because, for example, me, personally, I lost my house, all. What I have to win with if one French asks me, please excuse me? Nothing. The past is the past. But In Algeria, there is a group of the old fighters. They ask, they want that not the French people, but the state recognize his responsibility of the la souffrance, of the suffering of Algeria.